one of the few signees that are left on the board for the 2022 class, and that's Lebbeus Overton, the 5th rated defensive lineman in the country, 18th rated player nationally out of Georgia, top 3 player in the state of the Peach State there. And what is the latest we're hearing on him and a possible package deal?
Yeah, so I think he's coming for an official visit to Oklahoma on the 5th of March, if I remember correctly. So yeah, and I think it's really a package deal with his brother Micaiah, so I think Mark has been down to Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Oregon. It looks like Texas A&M doesn't really have the appetite for both to bring in Micaiah and Lebbeus both. So I think Oklahoma and Oregon are probably the 2 biggest players here. So I think you look at the track record that, I mean, at least here through his career, and then even what he's been able to do here, the short time, what Todd Bates has been able to do at Oklahoma, and then obviously previously at Clemson from a recruiting perspective. Given the fact that I think where Oklahoma has a chance for certainly Lebbeus to be able to play early on. I think initially he was really, really high on Oklahoma's list. Obviously, his brother was a previous. I'm sorry, not his brother. His father was a previous player at Oklahoma back in the '90s. So, I think you have that in your back pocket if you're Oklahoma, and I think it comes down to the culture. The culture change is really seemingly making a big impact. Not only with the kids that Oklahoma has on campus, but where Oklahoma has been able to make kind of a little bit of an uptick late there in the last part of the 2022 cycle. So it would be a huge get for Oklahoma to get both of those kids, but particularly Lebbeus, who is as you mentioned, top 5 defensive lineman in the country, top 20 overall kid. Would be Oklahoma's only 5-star. How interesting, ironic would that be that it's the one that's well after signing day. I think Oklahoma's still on the Connerly kid, the offensive lineman out of Washington, but haven't heard a whole lot on that. And that one's probably gonna go a while too. So I wouldn't expect this one to wrap up anytime. Obviously, definitely not before spring ball with taking some of that visit early on in March, but something that Oklahoma fans will obviously keep an eye on, and probably the biggest the biggest fish left, I guess, in the 2022 cycle. You never know about some transfer portal guys who may decide, even after spring ball, decide that, hey, I want to move on, but and see what that looks like. But I think right now these 2 kids are where Oklahoma coaching staff, from a recruiting perspective, here in 2022 are focused on.
We are talking about the 8th rated player in the country when we talk about Josh Connerly, who's still looking to make a decision. Then, as we mentioned with Overton, he is in the 247 Sports Composite number 17 overall. And then you pretty much go through the rest of the top 100. I did this a couple weeks ago. I couldn't find anybody else in the top. I'm sifting through the top 100 players in the country and even beyond that. And we're talking about the 2 heaviest hitters on the board by far. And we're talking about nobody else in sight that has not signed. So we are talking about the very last stragglers of the 2022 class, as I'm going now 250 players deep, and they're the only 2 on the board that have yet to sign. So if Oklahoma could nab one of those 2, and Lebbeus would be the most obvious one that's leaning in that direction, that's an enormous icing on the cake component to the 22 class.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely will. And I was just kind of looking back a little bit on this recruiting for Lebbeus. He's actually visited Oklahoma 3 times already. This will be the 4th. This will be the first under the Venables regime. He's visited A&M quite a few times. This will be the first, and both the kids are actually taking their visits obviously together to these schools. But this will be the first visit that he has to Oregon. So I think these visits will probably span the month of at least the first part of March. So yeah, no, it's exciting, especially who Oklahoma has been able to get through not only the 2022 cycle but the transfer portal. One of the biggest concerns I think for Oklahoma fans was among the defensive line. I think at least before Venables and his crew kind of came in, right? That based on who they were losing. So I think they feel good about where they're at, and this would just obviously be kind of the the tip of the cap here.